Hi there, Chris, Chap and the Cap, Motolegends. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is my excited face and it's a very exciting day because today we're going to be talking about the very first 2206 helmet on the market. It's the new Arai and it's called the Arai Quantic. This is the new Arai Quantic. The launch of any new Arai, let's face it, is a newsworthy event, especially for us here at Motolegends when it's a helmet aimed at the sport and touring market. Truth is, we get slightly less excited if it's a helmet aimed at the racing market. That's not quite our thing. But the most exciting thing about this helmet, the Quantic, is that it meets the new 2206 standard, a new safety standard for motorcycle helmets, and it's the very first helmet in the world to do so. Now, this new standard is a pretty big deal. We are recording this in March 2021. The standard has been agreed. Within a couple of years, all helmets will have to meet that standard. I figure that right now, a lot of motorcyclists don't know about it, but it is going to become a big thing as we move forward. If you want to know more about the standard, we have done a full review on YouTube, and if you're interested in head protection, and you should be, that's a video you must watch. It is an amazingly important subject. Of all the items of apparel that we wear, the helmet is the most important one. The main role of a helmet is to absorb energy in an impact. When you land on your head, you hit it, what you want to happen is you want that energy to be dissipated around the helmet so the minimum amount is transferred through to the skull, because what happens is when that energy or the impact happens, it sends the brain from one side of the skull to the other, and as it rebounds back, that bruising is what causes brain damage. Brain damage is irreparable. You cannot have it sorted at hospital. So that's why helmets are so important, and it's why this new standard should be important to you. The existing standard 2205 has been around for a long while. It's been around since 1982. So one might suggest it's well overdue that there's an improvement to that standard. On one level, that standard is just these days not particularly impressive. I'm not going to go into all of the pros and cons, all the details, but if you watch the video, you will glean our views from that. But you can go down to your local supermarket, you can go down to your local Lidl, and you can buy an ECE 2205 motorcycle helmet for £50. And for us, that kind of says it all. The new standard is much more rigorous, a much broader array of tests in all kinds of areas on the helmet. The main one, of course, is the energy absorption test. Now, the threshold is actually the same as it was for 2205, but the impact is now at a much higher speed. So they drop the helmet down onto an anvil, and they're dropping it from a much higher height. So even though the threshold is the same, it has to perform to a higher standard. Interestingly, for 2206, there's also a test from a lower standard than there was for 2205, and that's because there was a feeling that some helmets had shells that were so thick that they didn't really absorb energy in a very low speed impact. So if you fell off at 30 miles an hour or in town and just banged your head, some helmets were not absorbing enough energy. And if I were being critical, I would say that there's a chance that Arai was in people's thinking when they came up with that, because Arais are known to have a super thick shell. So interesting that this new test, higher level, but also a lower level, so it's going to make helmets much safer in all kinds of areas. There's a new test, for example, for the rigidity of a helmet. There was always a test for the rigidity of the helmet. They would put it in a machine and squeeze it. But now, after they've done the energy tests, if the shell has cracked, they have to do that test again to make sure that if you do go down and you crack the shell, that there's still an amount of rigidity in the helmet in case something further happens. An important new development for 2206 is glancing off, or an oblique angled impact, because it's now pretty much accepted that impacts where it causes the helmet to twist rather than a straight on impact, that can also cause serious damage to the brain, because as the skull rotates, it causes the brain, organs within the brain, or tissue within the brain rather, to tear, and that can also create damage. So glancing off is now an official thing within the safety standard. A couple of things that I wanted to say about Arai before we moved on. Now, people know of Arai helmets, everyone knows Arai helmets, and they are more expensive than most. And some people think that that is not worth paying for. They sometimes imagine that they're paying for this fancy brand, because after all, they all meet exactly the same standard. But that is not how it works in the helmet market. Different manufacturers test to their own standard, and it's got to be said that Arai has the highest standards. Arai have always tested to a much higher level than 2205, and the way that they test their helmets is totally uncompromising. They exceed 2205. In fact, in some ways, the way that Arai test their helmets, it's going to still exceed 2206 because, for example, there is not a penetration test under 2206. And Arai believe in the penetration test, and basically that's a sharp weight is dropped on the helmet in certain areas to see whether that will penetrate the shell. And Arai will still carry on doing that even under 2206, even though they are not obliged to. So when you buy an Arai, you are buying you're just buying into a higher level of protection. The concept that I was talking to about a minute ago, the angled impact, that is known within the industry as glancing off, and it has to be said that that has come from Arai. Arai invented the concept of glancing off. They've been talking about it for years in their literature, and it's why Arai helmets tend to have a very rounded shell. This comes out of MotoGP, and their feeling has always been that if you land on the ground as you're going along, you land on the track, you want a round shell so that it glances and doesn't get caught, doesn't twist the neck. So it is an affirmation of Arai's belief in the importance of glancing off, that's now been incorporated into the new standard. Got to be said that you can find helmets out there, you can find lighter helmets. Arai helmets do have a propensity to be a little bit heavier. This one isn't actually, and I'll come back to that. But you can find lighter helmets on the market, you can find quieter helmets. Again, Arai have been renowned for having slightly noisy helmets because they're all about racing, and racing's about ventilation. So they haven't always been the quietest helmets. You can find helmets with features that you just won't find on an Arai because the Arai philosophy won't allow them. Mr. Arai does not believe in a drop-down sun visor. He would never make a flip helmet. But of one thing you can be sure, you will never buy a better quality helmet. These helmets are made to an uncompromising standard. Every helmet takes 18 hours to make. Every helmet is inspected 5 times during that process. So it's no surprise overall for us that the world's very first helmet, the very first helmet that meets the 2206 standard, comes from Arai and from nobody else. Let's talk through some of the features of the helmet. First thing, the shell. In typical Arai fashion, it's a mix of organic and synthetic fibres. There's a stupid name for this shell. It was far too complicated for me to ever attempt to remember, but in essence, it's a peripherally belted shell. Arai use that in a number of their helmets, but in essence, what it is an extra thickness of the construction of the shell runs just above the eye line, creates extra rigidity of the shell so that you can have a slightly thinner shell in other areas. Arai make a big deal about this being a brand new shell for this helmet. It is a smaller shell and it's a lighter shell. And I wondered why that was. This is purely conjecture, but we do think that this is maybe a reaction to the 2206 standard and what I was talking about earlier on, which is the lower impact tests. Did mention that Arai is renowned perhaps for its slightly thicker shells, and those shells are not necessarily going to work particularly well in a low speed impact. So I do wonder whether Arai have developed this lighter shell so that this helmet can pass through those lower impact tests. We're never going to know. No one at Arai is ever going to admit that to us, even if it is the case, but we do wonder whether that's why they've developed this smaller, lighter helmet. And it is a smaller and lighter helmet. We compared this with the next 2206 helmet to come onto the market, which will be the Shoei NXR. We've actually got an American version where over there it's known as the RF 1400. We weighed them together. Normally, if we were to compare a Shoei and an Arai, we would expect for various reasons the Arai to be heavier because of that thicker shell, because they then need thicker EPSs. But when we compared these two, this helmet was actually 5 grams lighter. Perhaps that's not a fair test because that helmet was a Snell approved helmet, not an ECE 2206 helmet, so things may change down the line. But this is a much lighter helmet than I would have expected it to be. It's much lighter than a lot of other Arai helmets. Other things, it has, as you would expect, that Arai round shell. This spoiler, by the way, does not get in the way of that glancing off scenario that we were talking about. This is never going to come off in road riding, but if you apply any force to this, when you come off, that will just snap, it will just break away. So that will have no impact in terms of affecting the glancing off. For us though, this is the one downside to the helmet. We just don't like this spoiler, but that's Motolegends. That's the kind of company we are. For us, it's just a little bit racy, and we don't think it's not our interpretation of what a sports touring helmet is. But it performs a number of roles. I've said that it breaks off, but it's based on the spoiler that goes on the RX-7, and Arai tell us that they've tested it on this helmet at 300 kilometers an hour at Suzuka. Now, if this is a sport touring helmet, all that tells us is that they've got a much faster sport touring bike than we have. But it's good to know that it's fine at those speeds. This is adding stability at those speeds. We think that if this helmet did not have a spoiler, it would be our perfect retro helmet. In some ways, I think we would have preferred it even to the Rapide Neo that Arai bought out last year. The Rapide Neo is a lovely lid, great retro graphics, a great retro look, but it has that slightly aggressive Street Fighter nose, and if they had come to us with this helmet without this on, I think we would have said, that's the helmet, that's the perfect helmet, that's the helmet we've been looking for. Anyway, let's look further, let's delve a little bit deeper and look at some of the details. Venting. I have mentioned already, Arai is well known for its venting. When you're racing, you need lots of air in the helmet, so venting's never a weak point of an Arai helmet, but I think the way it's done on this helmet is quite clever. There are a total of 12 vents on this helmet, 6 incoming and 6 outgoing, 6 exhaust vents. There's this 3-position chin visor. You've then got our eyebrow vents here on the front of the visor. Eyebrow vents work incredibly well. They get cool air in just where you need it. I think they are fantastic. They have a slight reputation at times for creating noise in a helmet. You can certainly notice a difference when you're riding along and you close and open these vents. This is a really clever thing. This, and I've not seen this before, this Arai badge, which stands a little bit prouder of the shell, this is an open and closed vent, and that's easy to operate with your gloved hand. We also have 2 tear duct vents here. Arai tell us that this comes from their experience in Formula One, but they're quite neat, and again, quite easy to use in a gloved hand. In terms of air coming out, because once you've got air coming in, you need air to come out. This spoiler, there's a 3-position vent here on the back that you can adjust, so a lot of the air that's coming into the helmet is going to escape through the spoiler. We've also got here, and Arai tell us this is the first time they've ever done this on a helmet. They've built into the shell, they've built vents or exhaust vents into the shell. These vents, what they do, they're called Venturi vents, and as air passes underneath them, it creates negative pressure in the helmet and it pulls air out of the helmet, so it creates a better flow through, as it were. The last exhaust vent, the third way in which air can escape from the helmet, is through this panel at the back of the neck in the neck collar. So that means there are 3 areas for air to escape from this helmet. There's obviously the Venturi vents built into the shell, there are the vents underneath the spoiler, and then lastly through the neck collar. We're going to go out later in this helmet. We actually went out in it yesterday. It was rainy and a bit miserable, but it's a nicer day today, so we're going to go out. We're going to have to spend a little bit longer on the bike, and we'll test out the vents to see what impact they have in terms of noise and rideability. The visor system on this helmet is the variable axis system that Arai use on a number of its helmets, and it's very clever, and it's just more sophisticated than you get on most helmets. In essence, it's not just a simple rotation of the visor. At the last minute, the last part of the mechanism, it actually draws it in to seal around onto the rubber that goes around the edge of the visor aperture. So it locks it into place. And that's obviously good because it's going to make the helmet a little bit quieter, and it's going to prevent rain from running in because it just creates a tighter seal. What we have here on the side here, and Arai tell us again that this is related from their Formula One experience. We have this latch system. Now, what's interesting about it is it enables us to create a crack position, and we all know as bikers how important that is. It may be that you just, on a hot day, you just need a bit of cool air in, or on a colder day, if your helmet is starting to mist a little bit, you don't want to ride with it fully open, but you just want to get a little bit of extra air in. And what you do, you push this lever up, and that creates a gap here that just allows a little bit of air to come in and do whatever it needs to do. Once that's open, then you can just lift the visor straight up. The other important thing about this mechanism is that it has a proper lock-in mechanism. And I think that is so important. Often with helmets, the visor comes down, it sits there, but it's not held in place. What we really like in a helmet is where you have a very solid, positive closing mechanism. So if you can hear this, that's a locking mechanism. It means that the helmet is now properly sealed. In terms of the visor, we have a standard 120 pin lock comes with the helmet. That's as good as it can get. That's what we would expect from Arai. We went out yesterday in this helmet and it was a bit wet and miserable, and we didn't have a pin lock in the helmet because it arrived for us to try without a pin lock, and the helmet did mist up. We weren't going at great speed, but we came back, we put a pin lock visor in, and then we had absolutely no problems. Inside the helmet, we've got changeable liners, headliners and cheek pads. That to us here at Motolegends is incredibly important because we are of the view that, well, it's not a view, it's a reality. None of us have the same shaped heads. None of us have the same shaped faces. So in terms of the headlining, it doesn't change the shape of the head, but it enables us to kind of create a size in between sizes. So if you've got a 56, 58, we can create a 57 by putting in a different headliner. But by changing the cheek pads, having thicker ones or thinner ones, we can match the shape of your face. What we're trying to do is create a little bit of a squeeze here, and that's why it's important to have cheek pads. Classically, and I know that's going to happen here, we're talking about this in March, the helmet's going to arrive at April, May. The cheek pads will not be part of that first delivery. Everyone's in a mad rush to get their helmets out. The cheek pads will arrive in a couple of months. So we'll retrofit them if you've bought a helmet from us and it doesn't fit perfectly, but ultimately we will be able to make this a custom fit. The shape of the helmet, by the way, a little bit rounder than a Shoei. The reason that I wear an Arai, I love Shoei helmets, but I just cannot get on with them. The shape is too oval. My head is too wide here at the back, and if I wear a Shoei, after an hour or two, it starts to give me a bit of a pain. So this is a slightly rounder shape than a Shoei, probably not quite as round in our view as a Schuberth. Inside the helmet, as part of the cheek pads, they've got recessed ear pockets, and this has been designed to allow you to integrate earphones on a comms system. However, unlike Shoei and Schuberth, Arai doesn't work with anyone. There's no recommended system. I want to go off on a slight tangent here because I think what's going to work perfectly with this helmet is a new comm system that we've come across in recent weeks. It's from Interphone and it's called the UCOM system. It works very neatly. The battery goes on a pad here, so that's out of the way. Then the little bit that sticks on the side is very low profile, so it's not going to create a lot of extra wind noise. But what is fantastic about this new system is that it's got a Sena chip in. So if you get this system, the UCOM system, you can talk with people with a Sena or an Interphone interchangeably. You don't have to press any buttons. You can go out with a group of mates, and as long as they've got Senas or Interphones, you won't have a problem. If you've got a friend with a Cardo system, yes, you've got a problem. Other elements, we've got ERS cheek pads here. These things you pull out, emergency pulls, so that if you have an accident and the first responder wants to take the cheek pads out, that's just a pull-out system. You've got a breath guard here at the front of the helmet. That's quite useful. If you are riding in cold weather and there's some misting going on, what you want actually is your hot air from your nose to escape out the bottom of the helmet, and a breath guard always makes that a little bit more viable, makes it a little bit easier. Here underneath we've got a chin curtain, and again what that is showing us is that Arai, at least taking the subject of noise and quiet, they're taking that subject seriously. Finally, as with all Arais, it fastens by means of a D-ring. Let's summarise therefore. The Quantic comes in 5 sizes, from a measurement of 53 up to 62. 5 sizes: extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. Comes in 3 shell sizes. That's what we would expect of a premium helmet. We don't take helmets with 1 size shell seriously at all. Even 2 shell sizes is somewhat of a compromise. You will find it much harder to get a comfortable fit in a helmet that only comes in 2 shell sizes. So this is 5 actual sizes across 3 shell sizes. What that means is that extra small and small share a shell size, the smallest shell size. Medium has its own shell, and then large and extra large again share a shell. Have to say we were just immensely excited about this helmet. The spoiler aside, which is anyway just a personal thing, this is the kind of helmet that I think you could ride on absolutely any bike. You're going to get Arai's levels of uncompromising quality. You're going to get Arai's levels of protection, and even more so given that this is a 2206 helmet. Personally, I've got no qualms in suggesting that right now this is going to be the safest helmet, the safest road helmet that you can buy on the market today. I suspect that there might be huge demand for this first shipment when it comes in, and it's due to arrive with us, we think, end of April, but more probably early May. My view is that if you wanted to upgrade and you wanted to get yourself a 2206 helmet, and in particular this helmet, you might be advised to place an order now, particularly if you know your size, because if you know you're an Arai medium, you're going to be pretty much the same in this. If we have to change cheek pads, we can do that later. When those arrive, you can come and see us and we will change those over. Pricing, £500 for a plain colour. The graphic's going to be £600. The Arai, as I've alluded to already, is not going to be the only 2206 helmet on the market this year. In fact, all of the manufacturers understand the rules, obviously, and they're all rushing to get helmets into the market. We haven't heard of an imminent release of a 2206 from anyone else other than Arai and Shui, but by the end of the year, there may be some others. Now, the Shui, this helmet, is going to be called the NXR, so it's a replacement for the current NXR. This version is the RF 1400. This is the American model that we just got in to look at. We don't know the prices of the Shui, but they're going to be in the same ballpark. These helmets are, after all, very much competitors. Like the Arai, the Shui will not have a drop-down visor. The Shui and the Arai, again, we've alluded to this, are going to be more or less the same weight. Don't know if that was an unfair comparison, because that is an American model, and the one that comes through eventually might end up being a little bit lighter. Certainly the Shui is a little bit of a smaller helmet. The Shui comes in 4 shell sizes, not 3, and that's because the Shui has always been, the NXR has always been popular as a helmet for ladies, and so that's why they have put on a small shell size. So if you've got a very small head, or if you're a lady with a smaller head, then the NXR has always worked well, and this will be no exception. The comms solution is going to be better on the NXR. It's got an integrated solution rather like the GT Air 2 and the Neotech 2, so that may be an advantage. If you're someone who uses Senna, then that may be the one to go for. In terms of the other details, this is going to be a little bit rounder shell, so it looks to me as though it's going to be better at glancing off, but of course this helmet, the Shui, is also going to be passing the glancing off test. So my view is that if you are bothered about safety, and let's face it, who isn't, you need to look at one of these 2 helmets. There will be further choice down the road, but whatever comes onto the market, you will not find better quality, safer sport touring helmets on the market this year than one of these 2 models. There are a couple of other video reviews you might want to look at in relation to the Arai Quantic. You'll find the links to these in the description on YouTube. The first is our review of the 2206 safety standard. The second is we went and reviewed the helmet, or we went and rode in the helmet, spent a couple of hours out on the road to develop some impressions about what it was like to actually ride in. Again, you'll find that in the descriptions. If you'd like to look at other motorcycle helmets, be it Arai, Shui, or other sport touring helmets, then go to the website motolegends.com. If you'd like to learn more about the Quantic in particular, then if you click on one of the links on the screen, sometimes they're up there, sometimes they're down there, that will take you directly to the relevant page on the website. There you can check out the spec in a little bit more detail, you can check out availability, and obviously if you really like the helmet, you can buy one there and then. Now, buying from us is simple, straightforward and risk-free, or indeed we try to make it simple, straightforward and risk-free. There's no delivery charge on anything you buy from us, no item of protective wear, returns are totally free, and what's more, we give you a full 12 months in which to decide whether you do want to return something to us. We have the best price promise in the business. Now, John Lewis is rightly famed for its never knowingly undersold price promise. We go one stage better. If you can find anyone selling anything that we sell at a price that is lower than ours, we will beat their price by a full 10%. If the retailer is in the EU and not in the UK, we will match their landed price. Now, there are a few terms and conditions associated with our price beat, nothing particularly onerous, but if you are going to price beat us, I suggest you visit the website and check out what those terms and conditions are. In future, if you'd like to receive bulletins from us about new product launches, then if you go to the website, at the top of every page there's a piece of script that says newsletter sign up. Click on there, within seconds you'll be in business. In future, you'll receive our email bulletins. If, however, you prefer to get your information videographically, that is to say in this form, we would be simply delighted if you want to become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the button below. Now, we're recording this in March 2021. In 2020, we gave away to a YouTube subscriber a Mutt 125cc motorbike that we had customized to look like a Steve McQueen desert sled. Well, for 2021, we've moved a little bit up market. We're going to be giving away a 250cc Quantic Cavallero Scrambler. But we're not going to be giving it away to a YouTube subscriber, but rather to someone who follows us on Facebook. So if you'd like to stand a chance of winning that bike, go to our Facebook page, follow us, and then sometime before Christmas, so sometime in December, we'll be giving that bike away. I'd like to finish with a play for our fabulous little shop here at Motolegends. We are based about a mile from the centre of Guildford, a mile from the railway station. And as I've said, the shop is small, it's got a small footprint, but it's attached to our warehouse where we have more than £2 million worth of gear arranged over 3 floors. It technically makes this the second largest motorcycle apparel shop in the UK. But we think that we are far more than just the merchandise that we have here in the building. We're all about service, we're all about personal fitting. If you want to check us out, visit Trustpilot. We have the highest 5-star ranking in the business. When you come and see us, we'll serve you only the finest Italian illy coffee, or we'll serve you proper Yorkshire tea in a proper teapot. And who knows, you might even get to sample one of Sean's mum's delicious motorcycle-shaped shortbread biscuits. Anyway, this has been Chris. I hope to talk to you again soon.